Welcome, saints of the Lord. We are beginning a new study of Judges 6 verse 5 using Gematria analysis. Judges 6 verse 5. For they would come up with their livestock and tents, coming as numerous as locusts, both they and their camels, without number, and they invaded the land to ruin it. We started our study of Judges 6 in verse 1, the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC. And we have been moving forward on 100 years per verse basis. So verse 5 is the prophetic period of 187 BC to 88 BC. It is a time of calamity and near constant conflict of arms in the tiny territory of Judea. There were 4 major events during this period of time. All of them were predicted prophetically in the Gematria of this verse, as we will show. The 4 events are: Jerusalem is sacked twice. There is enforced Hellenization. There's the Maccabee Revolt. And there's the Judean Civil War. We're going to go through the events in detail because this verse is so rich prophetically. We need to know the history. And the secular events and the sacred events are intertwined, so we're not going to deal with them separately. We'll just deal with them both as we go along. In 175 BC, Antiochus IV takes the throne of the Seleucid kingdom, which was suzerain of Judea. Like his father, he did not antagonize the Jews initially. Antiochus then accepted a large bribe and changed the high priest in Judea to Jason. 3 years later, Antiochus received another bribe and changed the high priest again to a man named Menelaus. Jason wasn't happy. Jason spread rumors that Menelaus had sold articles from the temple to pay the bribe. In 170 BC, the 6th Syrian War between the Ptolemaic Empire to the south, and the Seleucid Empire to the north was engaged. Antiochus IV attacked Egypt and had success. On his return, he stopped in Jerusalem and he raided the treasury for 1,800 talents. In 168 BC, Jason heard a rumor that Antiochus IV died, so he attempted a coup against Menelaus. Antiochus IV believed Judea had revolted, and he was in a rage. He took his army up to Jerusalem, sacked the city, and killed and enslaved tens of thousands of Jews. Worse than that, he forbade Jewish customs requiring Jews to eat pork, to work on the Sabbath, to cease circumcising boys, etc. Antiochus IV confiscated lands and set up a new citadel in Jerusalem, and he established a Jewish-Greek syncretic religion. Not long after, he returned a second time and sacked Jerusalem again. In 167 BC, Mattathias, a Jew in the countryside, refused to make the mandatory offering to the Greek gods He killed another Jew for doing so, and the Greek official who was presiding over the ceremony. He fled to the hills. In 166 BC, a year later, he began a guerrilla warfare campaign, attacking Hellenized Jews, destroying Greek altars, and forcibly circumcising boys. He was nicknamed the Hammer, or, in their tongue, Maccabee. In 164 BC, Antiochus IV dies. The regent, who was put in his place temporarily because the successor was not immediately available, unbans Jerusalem. However, Mattathias captured Jerusalem while the Seleucids were distracted, and he reestablished Jewish practices in the temple. In 160 BC, Mattathias dies in battle. The Seleucids reassert control of Jerusalem and take hostages from prominent families. 153 to 152, Jonathan, the brother of Mattathias, agrees with Demetrius I, who was ruler of the Seleucids, on a deal. The Seleucids withdrew and they released the hostages from the prominent families in Jerusalem. But Jonathan then betrayed Demetrius I and made a deal with his rival. And as a part of that deal, Jonathan became high priest. In return, he would provide Jewish troops to fight in Seleucid wars. In 143 BC, Jonathan was invited to meet the Greeks for a conference. However, he was captured and executed. Simon Thassi succeeded Jonathan. In 141, Simon drove the Greeks out of the citadel in Jerusalem. In 139, importantly, Rome recognized the Hasmonean dynasty, that's the family of the original Mattathias and his sons, who were all rulers in succession. Rome recognized the Hasmonean dynasty, and that's significant because they became the legitimized thereby. Simon called himself Nasi, which means prince, and ethnarch, which means ruler. He did not appoint himself to be king. In 135, Simon and his two sons were murdered. The third son, John Hyrcanus, became the high priest. In 129, the Hasmoneans stopped paying tribute to the Seleucids. Effectively, they became an independent state. In 104, Aristobulus I became king and high priest. He was the son of John Hyrcanus. That's very significant. It was the first Hebrew Jewish king in 483 years since the captivity in Babylon. In 103 BC, Alexander Jannaeus became king and high priest. He favored the aristocratic Sadducees. The Pharisees, which were the other faction at the time, were critical and said it was against God's law for a king to be high priest. Furthermore, they didn't like the fact that Alexander Jannaeus was not descended from David, and therefore they did not consider him a legitimate king. In 99 BC, Alexander Jannaeus, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Jannaeus or Jannaeus, was performing duties as high priest, insulted the Pharisees by pouring their water libation not on the altar, but on his feet, which was a great insult. The crowd was shocked. They hurled insults and they threw lemons at him. Outraged, Alexander killed 6,000 people. The Pharisees fled and formed up military units, and a Judean Civil War broke out. As rebels, they called on the Seleucids for help, and the Seleucids agreed and sent an army with, at its head, Demetrius III, and they won a battle over King Jannaeus. However, the rebels switched sides in sympathy. They did not want the Greeks to rule over them again on second thought. But after they had switched sides and the Seleucids had gone home, war broke out again. The King Alexander versus the rebels. The rebels lost, and most of them were killed. King Jannaeus had 800 Jews, mostly Pharisees, crucified. He killed their wives and children before their eyes. Alexander Jannaeus increased the size of his kingdom considerably, being almost constantly on military campaign. He died in 76 BC. Other than the Pharisees, he was popular with the people, zealous as he was to impose Jewish laws and practices to a wider and wider circle of his region. Thank you for listening today. In our next video, we'll proceed to the Gematria analysis of Judges 6 verse 5.